today we're going to be discussing Quieter Landcare, certainly a hot topic this time of year. We're going to be spotlighting communities in Greater Chicago who have really been leading by example on Quieter Landcare with support from American Green Zone Alliance and Quiet Communities. Jamie Banks, Quiet Communities president and founder, will be moderating today. Let's get started. Jamie, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trish, and welcome everyone. Thank you for participating. I'm pleased to be your moderator today. In addition to our speakers, Dan Mabe, the president of the American Green Zone Alliance, or AGZA, AGZA, is also here on the panel and available to answer questions. It's fair to say that gas leaf blowers are distressing communities across the country. Of all gas-powered landscaping equipment, they're widely considered to be the most egregious. Municipalities have been struggling to address the issue. Some communities like Glendale, California, who we showcased at an event last year, have led by example, starting with an AGZA certified green zone program to transition municipal operations from gas-powered equipment. Other communities have started with a regulatory approach, in some cases successfully, but in many others not so successfully. Moves to regulate gas blowers can generate conflicts with landscaping businesses if not thoughtfully pursued, and can result in struggles that can last for years. Several years ago, AGZA and Quiet Communities began working with a group of municipalities in Greater Chicago, helping to guide an approach of constructive collaboration and phased regulation informed by the problem, the technical opportunities, and the economics. As Trish mentioned, today's event is focused on the approach of the group in Greater Chicago to successfully restrict gas blower use and improve the health and quality of life for residents and workers. We're pleased to welcome Michael Braiman, Village Manager of Wilmette, Illinois, and Police Chief Brian O'Connell of Winnetka, Illinois, who have been involved in leading and enforcing its regulatory approach. Michael, please start off.
Thanks, Jamie, and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm the village manager of Wilmette, 28,000 person community on the North Shore, north of Chicago. And we were one of the first communities to have a gas power leaf blower ban. I think it went all the way back to 2006. But one of the things I want to make sure we note here is just having an ordinance on the books doesn't actually work. You have to enforce it. And we never actually enforced our ordinance for many, many years until the pandemic came around and people were working from home and started hearing leaf blowers on a regular basis and were infuriated. And we're unhappy with us for not enforcing the regulations on our books. So I think one major takeaway here is if you actually enforce your regulations, you can have success. And we'll talk about our success a little bit. So once we started proactive enforcement, the next question from our residents came as, well, 6 months out of the year is not enough. We want more. Why are we allowing this at all? And one of the things we're really careful about here in Wilmette and all of the communities on the North Shore in Chicago is that we want to make reasoned and informed policy decisions. And we didn't have the ability to answer our residents why or why not in terms of more leaf blower regulations. So what we did was find safety in numbers. And I went and I started talking to other village managers and other nearby communities and talking about opportunities to partner to study leaf blower technology and policy and whether there was an opportunity to go it together and have kind of this force of numbers to have a similar response to all of our residents so that we're all talking from the same sheet of music. And that's what led us to forming a regional working group. It was 11 municipalities, 22 members. And importantly, it wasn't just members of our municipalities. What we did was include members of the landscape industry. So we had a representative of the Illinois Association of Landscapers. We had 2 landscaping companies in our working group. We had environmental advocates from our communities within the working group. We had police chiefs for enforcement. We had village managers for policy. We had a really diverse set of skills and experiences and inputs to have into this working group. And that I really strongly believe added legitimacy to our final report, which we'll talk about. But also what we wanted to have in any type of final report was some expertise. And that's where we brought in Quiet Communities and the American Green Zone Alliance, AGZA, because we as municipalities aren't experts in leaf blower technology. And we had decided that we would spend money on expert consultants to help solidify what our conclusions were. So we went through this year-long process with these municipalities, with the landscaping firms, with our expert consultants, Quiet Communities and AGZA, and produced a report that we then shared to all of our communities jointly on where technology was, what the limitations were, what the opportunities were. And what that allowed each of our communities to do was expand our leaf blower regulations in a reasonable way. And for some communities to implement new regulations for the first time in a fact-based manner, right? Relying on expert data, relying on input from the industry, learning from our past failures of enforcement. And it's turned into what we think is a model of great success. So as I talk to other communities in our area, what I really preach is work together on a regional basis on something like leaf blowers, because your landscapers aren't just working in one municipality, they're working across boundaries. Many times don't know which community they're even in, which makes it hard to follow regulations if they're disparate from town to town. Two is include industry in this. Sometimes that's difficult because the industry does not necessarily want to move in the direction of battery powered leaf blowers, but to be successful, they have to be a part of this from the very beginning. And you have to understand and respect and appreciate the challenges they're identifying because they're very real. And if you don't allow them to use the tools they need, that impacts your constituents. And your constituents then are unhappy with the services they're receiving. And then three is to rely on expert data. That gave us an important kind of third leg of the stool to stand on to make sure we are comfortable with our recommendations. So really a great success. Our regional leaf blower working group report is available on our website. I can send it out to anybody who's interested here. It's a really good framework of how you can study this issue and try to advance regulations. As I talk to other village managers who don't have regulations, one thing I make sure I mention is this is a value add to our community. You walk around Wilmette now or Winnetka that you can talk about, it's quiet. It is phenomenal how quality of life in our community is improved by taking the time to study this issue the right way, regionally with industry experts, and then to actually enforce it. And I know Chief's going to talk about the enforcement, but that is critically important. So we really are excited about what we've done, and now we're taking it the next step further. We've just engaged Quiet Communities and AGZA to come on site into our communities during fall and spring leaf cleanup seasons and study the efficacy of battery powered leaf blowers in the real world, in our environment, because we have a very heavy tree canopy here, to see if we can further extend regulations. I'm not sure or not optimistic the opportunities are there, but that's why we want expert data, expert field observation, so that when we have to answer a resident who says, well, why don't you just ban this all the time? We can show them a study. We can show them real world data that says, we're just not there yet, but we're trying to get there. And maybe we could ban it in the spring, but not yet the fall. So this has helped, as I get the most complaints of leaf blowers than anything else in our community a lot of times. Relying on these experts and the data and the report we've put together has really quelled a lot of frustrations in our community. Jamie, I think you're muted there. I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mike. That was a great overview. I did have one question before we hand it over to Brian, and that is, how did you reach out to residents and inform them, get their support, let them know what was going on, and what has been the response of the community to the effort?
Sure. The community has been really appreciative of the effort. There's still a small segment that think we should do more. But when you explain to them our kind of rationale and our thoughtful, logical process, they at least appreciate that and respect that. So we inform the community in a variety of ways. One is we have a weekly email blast that goes out, and we've got about 7,000 or 8,000 email addresses on it and a 70% open rate. So it's a really good way for us to reach residents. So When we formed the committee, we let the community know. And then when the report was finalized, we published it, we presented it at the village board meeting. But one of the things we also do is we're really high touch in our communication. So if we have an issue that a lot of people are contacting us about, we'll build an email database and then we'll email that group out updates. So for something like this, we email them updates of, hey, we started this study. Here's where we're at 6 months in. Here's the final report. So people not only were informed, but they appreciated hearing directly from us because we knew they were interested. And we bought a lot of goodwill that way. And it takes time, but it's worthwhile because then people understand and appreciate your processes rather than just assuming the village doesn't do anything or the village doesn't care. It's a way for us to educate while we outreach.
Okay, thank you. A couple more things. What were the challenges to bringing in industry into the working group and really getting people lined up to agree on how to move forward?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in getting the industry in the working group was trying to find the smaller business owners. It's easy to find the large landscaping companies that are more corporate run, that have the staff and the time to devote to something like this. If you're looking at kind of the mom and pop landscape company, it's just not going to happen. So I do think there was a bit of a blind spot there in our working group as we had the larger companies who will also then have the financial resources to go ahead and buy battery powered equipment in a way that the smaller companies don't. So I still think that's something we need to do a better job of. But that is why we brought in the Landscape Association. So their executive director, clearly not supportive of these regulations, but appreciative of being included in the process. And he had a seat at the table, and he was at least able then to represent the landscape companies as a whole at a global level, and was very forthright and willing to share his opinions, and those were included in our final reports. So I think that was the way we found around that challenge with the small business owners, but I think it's still something we're going to struggle with as we look to further expand regulations, knowing that they are the most impacted by having to buy new equipment.
Yeah. And just lastly for now, has there been pushback by the smaller companies or the need to increase service prices, anything like that you've observed or heard about?
So we've been very flexible in working with the smaller companies, especially. To enforce, we try to educate first before we issue citations for violating the regulations. But we're not looking to extract financial penalties from any of these companies. So what we'll do is if we do cite them, we ask them to go purchase the necessary equipment and then show us proof of that. And then we waive their citations. And generally, they're appreciative of that. So we have not, I actually have not had any landscaping companies contact me directly frustrated or concerned about our regulations. So I think it's just the way we work with them is to try to be collaborative as opposed to punitive has been helpful.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to turn it over now to Brian to really address some of the enforcement issues, maybe some of the challenges, what's happened in his community, what he's heard from other communities. So please go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Jamie. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian O'Connell. I'm the chief of the Winnetka Police Department. I've been with Winnetka for about 25 years now. I'm going to highlight a couple things about enforcement. I think it's important to kind of know our history. This did not happen overnight. The success of our enforcement did not happen overnight. So we're about 13,000 community members. We're just north of Wilmette along Lake Michigan. Prior to 2022, we were addressing these leaf blower violations by calls for service by reaction-based enforcement, meaning we weren't proactively going out there and identifying violations. Like Michael said, COVID kind of changed everything where people began to realize how loud these were while they were working from home. And it changed the dynamic in our community and the requests from our residents about how we address these. So just to put in perspective, in 2022, we had 31 violations and 42 calls that we identified as being in compliance. That number shot up in 2023 to 110 violations and 195 in compliance, and then in 24 over 200 on each one. So we changed our mindset with our community service officers primarily. During the day, we assigned our community service officers to go out proactively and address not only violations in our community, but also identifying and supporting the landscapers that were in compliance. We would collect that data on every contact that we had and bring it in on a monthly report. Our ordinance prior to 2024 was prohibiting gasoline-powered leaf blowers between the months of May and September. In 2024, council made the decision to change that based on the regional leaf blower working group that Winnetka was a part of with Wilmette, and began a ban for all months except for heavy leaf seasons of April, October, and November. In my opinion, I think that is a reasonable place to fall and land on, and we've had overwhelming support from our residents with that change to those months. We're part of this evaluation coming up too for next season, and identifying if there is a reasonable resource or tool out there in the battery operated field that could address these heavier leaf months. But right now we've had tremendous success in reducing the noise and the complaints from our community. We did do a few things over the last few years that I think are a little unique to our community in regarding to educating as well. I have them here. I don't know if they're able to show them, but anytime we had a violation for a homeowner's contracted landscaping company, we would hang a door hanger on the resident's front door. We would identify that we had a contact with a landscaping company that they contracted in violation. Our officer would write their name and date of the contact, and if there were any questions, the police called the police department. I believe that went a long way, because the residents, I think, are contracting companies, but not following up or asking the questions, are you going to comply with the ordinance in our community? Now, once residents began to find that information out and identify that they contracted a landscaping company that violated the ordinance, they either changed their landscaping company or followed up to make sure that they were going to be in compliance moving forward. Like Michael said, I think the mom and pop landscaping companies, they're always going to be there. And I, from the police perspective and our contacts with them, it's just a balance of risk reward. If I could speak frankly, I think, larger landscaping companies can afford to make these changes, and I think the smaller ones are struggling with that a little bit. So we are continuing to see most of our violations with the smaller landscaping companies that are at risk of receiving the fine. We are a little bit harsher, unfortunately, than Wilmette, though. If there is a violation, it's a citation, and there isn't a period of waiting to see if they can get in compliance. We have educated for many years leading up to this, and we feel that we've provided enough notice, and people that are in violation are going to be addressed with a citation. We also require a landscaping application and a license to perform this work in our community. When they sign that landscaping license application, they agree to be in compliance with our village ordinances. So as we were transitioning through the last few years, we did things as a letter of a promise letter, a commitment letter to the landscaping companies. We would receive 60 to 100 of them a year, promising to comply with the ordinances. And then we just transitioned in this last year and a half to landscaping applications. And that has kind of streamlined our approach and the understanding with these companies about what the expectations are in Winnetka. So that's the summary of our enforcement in a nutshell.
Thank you, Brian. And I'd like to ask one question, and then I'm going to invite Dan to ask a question before we open it up to the audience. Brian, you mentioned that, you know, some differences in the way Winnetka has gone about things versus Wilmette, and it just raised the thought across the 11 municipalities. I'm sure they benefited from the common conversations and seeing the different ordinances in communities, but at the same time, are there differences in these ordinances and how they were constructed to meet, you know, different variations in, you know, resident demand or whatever?
Yeah, I think, and I think Michael would probably be a better person to answer this question as from the village management perspective. But I don't know every specific community's language, but I believe that we try and get as close as we can on the North Shore. I think there's a commitment to try and have some shared languages that if a landscaping company is in Wilmette in the morning and then in Winnetka in the afternoon, there's a pretty good assumption that the ordinances are parallel or mirroring each other. And I think being part of this regional working group with all these communities, I think our hope is to have that same language across the board. So if you go to Highland Park, you go to Winnetka, you go to Wilmette, there's not a lot of guessing. There's not a guessing game community to community, but I can't answer what other communities are doing currently. Mike, anything on that?
Yeah, that was a super interesting part of our process because we were all looking to try to align, but we're all still a little bit different, and we all have our own elected boards that may want to do their own variation of things. So we talked about that through the process as a working group, and how do we do that? And what we did was provided reasonable policy options for each board to consider, so that there was a menu to try to at least find some consistency within those reasonable policy options. And I think for the most part, most communities settled on the 9-month ban that both Wilmette and Winnetka have, or that we expanded to, because the data within the report justified that. So there were some communities who were part of the group who had no regulations, who then went to a 9-month ban. There are others like Wilmette and Winnetka, us, who had 6, who went to 9. And then there were a few participants who did nothing. They had no regulations, and they decided to continue to have no regulations, but follow our process moving forward. So I think it kind of worked itself out that those who now have regulations were all similar. But one of the other things that we're still working through is licensing of landscapers. Enforcing leaf blower bans is much easier when you license, because you're able to contact the landscapers at the start of the season, sending them information in multiple languages. You're able to potentially remove the licensing if they don't comply with your regulations. There's a lot of benefits of licensing, but not everybody in our working group licensed landscapers. So one of the communities that doesn't is trying to work on a regional licensing system that would make it easier for landscapers in municipalities. It's been a struggle. We're still working through that, but it would be a really ideal outcome. That, the more consistency we have across our region here, better it is for the landscapers, the better it is for our communities and for our residents.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Brian. Dan, do you have any questions?
Yeah, sure, Jamie. Thank you, Trish, Jamie, Rachel. Always an honor to participate with QCI, and Michael, Chief O'Connell. Really a lot of accolades for the approach that you've taken. It's very symmetrical. You have included industry, and they just really want that seat at the table, and to see how they can work with and not against. So really love the approach. I'm going to start out with an update, and then I have one question for Chief O'Connell. I was in Greater Chicago last week, and we were brought in by a large company. They're the second largest landscape maintenance and installation company in the United States. It's Yellowstone Landscape. And your efforts in this approach, I'm sure, have led to us coming there and training 30 plus supervisors at the different branches that they have that operate in the working group that you put together, Michael. And I can tell you that they are very motivated to get ahead of this. And it's not just going to be electric blowers. It's going to be a full-scale, fully electric trailer setups, and it's going to go a little bit at a time, a cinch by the inch, but definitely the efforts are leading to very positive outcomes such as that. Chief O'Connell, I just wanted to ask, in a lot of places that we go to, we're asked, we have a lot of bilingual staff and representatives at AGSA when we do our neighborhood canvassing and engagement with, showing the technology and helping people understand that there's an ordinance in place if that's what we're tasked to do. Have you guys had any issues with language barriers when engaging the gardeners themselves out in the field?
So the answer to that is no, but I would say that is a real struggle. I would say we're fortunate that we have many bilingual officers that are on our police department, our CSOs, all of them except one speak Spanish. We were very fortunate to have that ability to speak Spanish with many of the landscapers that were working for smaller companies or even the large scale ones. We also, though, provide the information on a handout flyer that's included that could be shared today that has our regulations not only in English, but on the flip side of the flyer has our regulations in Spanish. So we have that ability to communicate effectively with everyone that we're observing out in the community through these landscaping companies.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, Dan, anything else, or we'll open it up to Q&A?
Let's open it up.
Okay. Let's see. One thing I did, Rachel, I emailed you the attachments that Brian referred to, so that they can be posted. Before I get started with the list here, I just want to acknowledge that we did have at least one, maybe a couple of questions come in through email before the event itself, and we're going to get to those questions. We're going to start by first asking questions that directly address the efforts that have been made by the villages and municipalities in Illinois. Let's see. I think there's one question: how do you involve landscapers? My town banned leaf blowers at a town meeting, and the landscapers petitioned to rescind the ban and pack the next meeting. It was very, I think I know this community, it was very controversial, and there was a lot of pushback from the landscape industry. I think that, Michael, you've answered that in part, but if you had any other suggestions about how towns, other municipalities might go about engaging. Is it useful, for instance, to engage the State Landscaping Association? Did that have an impact in then bringing on companies? Any sense of how that might work generally?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I don't think any of our 11 members of our working group had landscaping companies coming to our meetings to object to the regulations. I think that's because our regulations are reasonable and rational, right? And one of the reasons we formed the working group was to be able to answer our residents' questions of why don't you just ban these year round? Because there's real limitations and it's not practical. I think for communities that just ban them year round because that's what their residents want, and I understand that, I think that's what has led to some of those landscaping companies coming, because they frankly can't do their jobs during fall cleanup with that type of technology. So I think the rational approach we took, the pragmatic approach, was an important part of making sure that the landscapers weren't actively objecting. I don't think including the Landscape Association in our process helped in that regard. I think they helped inform us and give experience of landscapers, but I don't think they were reaching out to all the hundreds of landscapers that work in Wilmette and saying, we're representing you, don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, did the manufacturers of the tools, the electric tools themselves, play a role in the committee?
The manufacturer,
Meaning the working group.
yeah, the manufacturers didn't, but that's where we relied on Quiet Communities and AGSA to provide their expertise and their familiarity with those manufacturers and the technology. That was super helpful.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'll just mention that.
Jamie, I am
Yeah,
so sorry.
Dan,
Just
go
a
ahead.
quick follow-up to that one.
Sure.
AGSA and Quiet Communities, we work together to independently test these Apex tool brands. Not only for their reliability, their performance, but their cradle to grave cycle life potential, and if they have a really good chance of that ROI. So we definitely thank you, Michael, for acknowledging. We give an objective, independent of the manufacturer, set of data and summary as we know it to be. And we've been doing this for over a decade, this process.
Thank you, Dan. Next question is, how was this initiative received by the city crews? And was that before you made the additional efforts on a regional basis? I'm assuming the question means to include local businesses.
So when it's city crews, are we talking about like the impacts on our public works staff? Is that the question?
Yeah, if you have municipal crews that maintain perhaps your parks and
Yeah,
public buildings and things like that.
that's been a challenge. So we have a park district, which is a separate governmental entity. And when we first passed our regulations, we exempted the park district from them because of the sheer volume of park space they had to address. But they did make a commitment to transition to battery powered equipment, but they didn't just want to throw out good working equipment that was gas powered that they may have bought a year ago. So they voluntarily transitioned on their own because they know that's what our community wants. They've just done it over a period of time. Where we struggle still is the golf course. So we have a couple private golf courses and a park district golf course. And those golf courses have met with our Environmental and Energy Commission and have made the case that they need gas powered equipment still. The technology is not there to do away with that during the summer season. And our commission has understood that. So it's an iterative process. It's a collaborative process. But it's certainly a challenge because there's no magic wand just to get rid of all gas powered leaf blowers in your community, even during the summer months when you think it might be doable.
Yeah. Yeah, Brian, did you have any comment on that from your experience in Winnetka?
Just a couple things. The village made a commitment with not only the village's contracted landscaping company, but also with the schools and the park district that we would all be on the same expectation as our community. So we don't have any gasoline powered leaf blowers that performs any cleanup for village owned property. That's all been transitioned to electric within the ordinance timeframe. The only exception we made, and we allowed them, I believe it's 5 years in the ordinance, is the park district regarding the golf course. And then at that 5 year mark, it's the expectation that they transition to electric as well.
Okay, thank you. Dan, anything to add there? Okay. Let's see. Next question. Some of the questions overlap, so I'm trying to not be repetitive. Okay, is there any conversation about not removing leaves under trees or reducing the amount of lawn in general? Mike, that's probably for you.
Um, any type of blowing activity is not ideal for the native environment, right? It's just not good. So we do have a Leave the Leaves campaign. We are trying to educate our residents that your lawn doesn't have to look perfect, that you don't have to blow everything in your beds. You can leave some of your leaves. So we're working on that. It's a struggle for people to really understand and appreciate and then communicate their expectations to their landscapers. But we really have an active private citizen group. It's called Go Green Wilmette in Town, that a lot of residents are members of or participate in. And they set the example. They help get the word out as well. So we partner with them to try to educate. And that's something we'll continue to do more of.
Okay, thank you.
Jamie, do you see
So-
Dan?
Yeah.
Dan has his hand up. Yes.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm just going to add to that really quick. Yeah, Jamie, we actually, with the report we put together for Michael originally, I want everyone to know if people can adopt a more ecological approach, there's a correlation of how many batteries you actually need to do the work. So if you're leaving the leaves and you have a best practice, for example, where you're only blowing hardscape, that is a direct correlation to the three different models of and approaches that require different battery banks, therefore more cost. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, thank you, Dan, for mentioning that. And I'll just add a little background that when we did the study, we modeled it using three types of aesthetic expectations. One was the highly manicured aesthetic, where every leaf, customers asked that every leaf be removed from the lawn. One was a more relaxed aesthetic, where maybe you'd leave a few leaves, they would be mulched during the fall, and then very relaxed aesthetic. So the battery requirements of each of those scenarios differed pretty greatly because the cost of doing business with battery technology is really linked to the cost of the batteries. So the fewer batteries you need, the more, the easier it's going to be to participate as an electric company. Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to one question. What is it's really saying, have any of the landscaping companies said that the battery powered equipment is really not powerful enough to do the job? Now, I know that they have not been asked to do it in the fall yet, but has there been any of that kind of pushback?
We have not received that feedback with our 9-month ban, and we've had that in effect now for 2 years. So again, that's why we did the 9 months, because we were comfortable the technology could do that. And that's why we want to do this upcoming study before we go any further. But again, the idea is to make sure that your regulations match the technological and the financial realities of the marketplace.
Let's see. For Brian, did Winnetka consider doing an affidavit with photo evidence to be submitted by residents so that it did not overly burden police?
No, that was never something we considered. I think I would prefer to have those contacts through the police department or code enforcement versus that could result, if I understand the question correctly, that could result in some pretty bad conflict between neighbors and community members. So I think our proactive approach on that was probably best served as it allowed us to be the face of the ordinance in furthering the betterment of the community in that regard. So no, it was never something I considered.
Yeah, and that was something the working group discussed, and there was concern about having people take pictures of individuals and send them into the government. It just didn't feel right. So we're not doing that either. And I think another enforcement point that was important to the group, from an equity perspective, was at least in Wilmette, we're not citing the individual employee, we're citing the company, because the employee is working at the direction of the company. And that's been really important to our community. And we communicate that when we push out our regulations so that they understand that that employee is not being penalized financially for doing the job they're directed to do.
So
That is
two
the same in
related.
Winnetka. That's the same in Winnetka too.
Okay, thank you. Two related questions right underneath. One is, can you explain how police officers were more proactive? Did they go out and do kind of sweeps of neighborhoods to identify companies that were not in compliance?
So our action on this was primarily led by our community service officers. Our police officers are extremely busy. But our community service officers, their primary function are non-law enforcement encounters. So we have the ability for them to assist with school crossings, parking enforcement, other village needs throughout our community, and they proactively would drive side streets, our residential community areas, and identify people not only in violation but in compliance. And when they were in compliance, we would register that data as well as violations that they were observing.
There's so many differences in how communities have been approaching this, and some of it's related to the size of the city, the configuration of the city, infrastructure, whether they're able to have licensing and fund that appropriately, or have code enforcement officers that can help police. And these are differences that we see across communities. The next question is one we get a lot, and it is, what about rakes? Well, we love rakes, and we really, really wish that they were practical for industry. But any comment there?
I'll just say, from the North Shore perspective, our constituents, our residents, have expectations on the service they're going to receive for their lawn. And our policies have to mirror or match those expectations. And that's what we're trying to do here, is provide the flexibility to use the equipment that they want their landscapers to use, but do it in a less intrusive way.
There's
Okay.
definitely, Jamie, a place for rakes and people-powered tools to be used and paired with the motorized tools, for sure. It doesn't matter whether you're using a gas or an electric blower. The proper way to do it sometimes is to stop, put the blower down once you've amassed a big pile, and it's going to be actually more efficient and faster to clean up that pile and then proceed again with the leaf blower.
Just a comment, noise protection should be required for workers, many of whom don't speak English. Dan, I'll let you just comment quickly on that for electric as well as gas.
Yeah, noise per ANSI standard 50 feet is a lot different than the operator using it right next to them. Definitely, even if it is electric, we're going to recommend that you wear hearing protection, especially for prolonged hourly use.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Rachel, I think there was a question about the guidance that Brian had mentioned for getting compliance by businesses. I'm not quite sure what it means, but Brian, do you have any comment? Do you have some guidance available, or did you use guidance to inform your enforcement efforts?
Not really understanding the question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah.
I'm not really understanding what.
Lois, can you repost the question and just make it a little bit clearer? Okay, we'll go on. There was a golf course question, but that's been answered. For Michael, Michael, you mentioned evidence. What evidence do you use to support the leaf blower ban? Was it noise, pollution, or harm for the environment, or all of the above?
You're on mute.
Oh, you're muted, Mike.
I mean, it's all the above, but frankly, it came down to noise. Our residents just frustrated with the continuous noise interruptions during their day. And the air pollution is a component of it, but the noise carries the day.
Are the landscapers able to charge their equipment at residents' homes? Or
I mean, we don't prohibit it, so if they can work that out with their customers, then sure. I've heard of that happening in town a few times.
I'm trying to get through. We have to leave a couple minutes to close, but I think we have time for a few more questions. Are there any unexpected results from the initiative that you did not initially expect? I guess Mike and Brian, that could go to either of you.
You never know what to expect when you go into these, but I think we've just been really pleased with the smooth transition as we have extended our regulations and other towns have implemented them. But I think the most unexpected was walking around the neighborhoods and hearing how quiet it was. It is really obviously different in our communities, and so much of that has to do with the proactive enforcement that the chief talked about. But it's been more of a value add, I think, than I would have ever imagined.
I would just say I think the most pleasant surprise for us in the enforcement side is that our enforcement numbers are on the decline dramatically. I mean, having 64 violations this year is probably the lowest we've been since 2022. So the transition of these larger landscaping companies to work with us and be in compliance with us has been a great thing.
Yeah. Okay, I do want to make sure to get to the question, Trish, that came in by email. Could you bring that up and just ask that to our participants?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I'm just going to ask it of Dan. We did have a question from someone who is noise sensitive, as we all are, but particularly sensitive, about have there ever been lawsuits against manufacturers related to harm from noise?
None that we know of. We asked the manufacturers that question years ago and really couldn't get a straight answer. But these manufacturers, I don't know, they're pretty influential. They have deep pockets, and I think back then they were willing to maybe fight such a lawsuit. But since you brought this up, we really need to acknowledge how far they've come as manufacturers, the rapid prototyping, the dedication to R&D. They have really invested millions, if not tens of millions of dollars into all of this to get us to where we are at now. So hopefully that won't ever be necessary moving forward. And again, just moving forward in that positive direction and watching this technology just improve every 3 to 4 years.
Thank you so much. That's great. And in keeping with sort of the hopeful sweep of this conversation, and I just had a question, Michael or Brian, do you have any tips for residents who are seeking to start a working group?
All right, that's a great question. I saw that in the chat, and I've been thinking about it. Well, I think it's really important to have a champion amongst the elected body or of the staff of the community to help be a part of this. My full village board was a champion because they knew their constituents wanted this, which then made me a champion of it because my employers wanted it done. But all this started at the grassroots level, right? It started with that organization I mentioned, Go Green Wilmette, continuing to bring this up as an issue, as a concern, and putting pressure in a respectful way on the elected officials and on the staff. I think it's just continuing to push, doing it, the right way, and trying to find that champion who then can kind of start to bring this process together.
Thank you. Brian, do you have anything to add? No.
I think I would just be saying the same thing that Michael did. I think the primary goal, find a group that's motivated and it's going to stay on course. I think this working group had a wide variety of qualified people, and all of them were motivated to stay on course. So I was fortunate enough to get on part of this towards the end of my predecessor's time in Winnetka, and then me jumping on. So this group had a lot of positive meetings that got us to this point.
An enormous thank you to Mike and Brian for all their efforts, and really to the entire working group for coming together and making this possible and showing other communities that it can be done. It's not easy, but it can be done, and it can be successful. So thank you.
Quiet communities.